Hi friends, host Eric here, host of Talking with Fans People. Feeling pretty depressed at the moment, or disillusioned. So, the thing is, I can be wrong plenty of times. I've been wrong last times, I'll be wrong in the future too. I'm always learning ways in which I try not to be wrong about something. Uh, Usually it's some sort of minor fact or or significant facts sometimes, but that I'm uninformed about, and I get informed about by people and so forth, and I love that. I love being informed about where I'm wrong because when I say I live the way of correctness, it really is a thing, and it really is very very different than what anybody who argues an agenda does. So I genuinely want to, in every instance, show that I'm both open minded and siding with that which is correct. Tonight I had another big argument with these people who insist that the 2020 election was stolen. The thing is, it's so frustrating because I don't want to get bogged down into a bunch of details about it. Nobody's ever showing me any convincing evidence that there's any reason to believe the election was stolen. However, if you start getting bogged down in this conversation, you discover that the people are determined to uphold their conclusion. It doesn't matter, right? So it's like, I've yet to hear any reason from anybody to think that that election was stolen. I've seen pieces of evidence from Legends Fall you gave me that were, there's a style of bullshit that it looks like this. You take data sets and you find patterns in them that match your interpretation and you draw them out of the data set. But they're just, it's like if you look at any big enough data set, you'll see patterns that match what you want. And you just cherry pick those and bada bing, bada boom. It ignores every countervening piece of evidence. That's the key thing. You know when somebody's working an agenda when they're only arguing one side of things, they're ignoring the countervening evidence. So you might say, well, Eric, you're doing this about the Trump election. You're ignoring the fact that there were lots of people who believe it's stolen. There were lots of court cases. There was this one case where Alito had an injunction in PA and blah, blah. It's like, okay, guys, first of all, the only way that a reasonable person thinks that election would have been suspicious is if Trump had won. If Trump had won, it would have been very suspicious because all good understandings of the populace as a whole in the country, not just the middle of the country, but the coasts as well, all realistic assessment of the voting population recognized that the dislike for Trump was so strong amongst those who disliked him, and that represented a majority of the population, that it didn't matter who ran against him. People were going to vote for that person. I've heard many of the Trump election stolen people say, "Who would vote for Biden? That makes no sense." Of course, that's perfect. You hear that shit and you go, "Okay, this is an agenda person," because the answer is obvious. People didn't vote for Biden; they voted against Trump. Right? It's pretty obvious when you're as divisive a figure as Trump, and to say that Trump was not divisive is just being, again, not honest, right? Trump was extremely divisive. He's still extremely divisive. And the reason he was so divisive in large part was because he was so adversarial to anybody who disagreed with him or opposed anything he said. He was so unwilling to have a conversation with people about he just was incapable and unwilling of having adult conversations with people. He didn't understand. He just didn't understand the office, the office of the presidency. Regardless, the point is, regardless of what you think about Trump, most people I encounter that are pro-Trump are mostly anti-left, and Trump's just the figure of the moment they've been entrusted to. They tend to introvertedly intuit a bunch of larger sort of leftist schemes and and find examples. Again, search large data sets, find examples that are consistent with their thesis, and bada bing, bada boom, you've cherry picked yourself what appears to be a case, but isn't, because you haven't done an honest investigative process that involved deliberation and a genuine disinterest in the outcome. You've gone in with an agenda, and you've managed to prove it according to your own satisfaction, but not to anybody else's. And you go about being incredibly stubborn in your persistence in your conclusion. And I get dragged down in these conversations where it's like arguing about this court case or that court case. Again, nobody's showing me any evidence to think this election was stolen. And the only thing that would possibly have been a suspicious outcome is if Trump had won. And this is from somebody who didn't vote. I did not vote for either person. I did not like either choice. I didn't vote the previous election either. And the reason is, even though I was really willing to vote for just about any adult candidate, there were neither of them were, in my mind, adult candidates. Do I think Trump was all bad? No. Do I think he did some good and useful things? Yes. I think he got us out of some international agreements that we needed to get out of. I think he sort of shook up the establishment in ways that aren't all bad. I think that he was at least authentic. He was authentically himself. He wasn't feeding everybody a line of bullshit. He tried to do what he said he was going to try to do. And in other words, he didn't misrepresent himself in any way. When he did, it was because he actually believed it. When he said, "I'm a very stable genius," he really believed that. When he said, when asked why should we be not worried about COVID, and he said, "I got a hunch." He really believed that was a good enough reason, that his hunch should be taken at face value, just like his hunch about the election should be taken at face value. There's all sorts of purported conspiracies and gaming the election and whatnot, but again, that's just from people who are seriously in one camp and are refusing to be honest about the general demographics. The general demographics were clear. He was, everybody who didn't approve of him hated him. So, with an approval rating under 50%, you're not likely to get elected under those conditions. That's just common sense. You might say, well, common sense is enough. Well, why are we investigating this election? Well, because Trump was casting aspersion on it before it even happened. Before he had any possible explanation or any possible evidence, he was casting aspersion on it. And everybody started scrambling, looking for evidence before there was any indication, clue, cue, sign, hint, anything indicating anything fishy going on. People were scrambling to put together these kind of bullshit cases that I'm talking about. And people were scrambling to affirm them and argue them and hold on to their wrongness, even in the face of common sense. And a totally fair critique on my part. It's like, somebody show me some real evidence of actual fraud that was, that clearly benefited Biden, and you couldn't find equivalent patterns in the data elsewhere that benefited Trump. Show me, find somebody who's genuinely objective about the matter. I'm not going to do the work because it's obvious to me that it's a waste of time. But if you want to convince me that the election was stolen, then you have to do actual. If you want to convince me the election is stolen, step one, don't yourself be convinced until you should. And nobody I've heard be convinced of this should be convinced of it. They're all driven by their agendas, and none of them are using good TI. And that's all there is to it. Whether they're TI users or not, I don't know, but none of them are using good TI. A good TI user doesn't allow NI to supplant TI when NI, without qualifying at least that what one is claiming is not actually justified logically, but rather just by one's intuition, that take it for a grain of salt. They'll make the claim, just say, well, I intuit this, but I have no real reason to believe it. If you're not going to say that, don't. Then keep your mouth shut, You're not being honest.